If you love training like a hybrid athlete, but you're worried about overuse injuries or you're currently experiencing aches and pains from overuse, then this podcast is for you. Because today we're going to cover tips and tricks that we use in our program to help you stay healthy and fresh so that you can stay with your program and keep making progress as a hybrid athlete.
In today's episode, we are going to talk about how to prevent injury while training hybrid.
That's right. If you have ever experienced injuries while running, it is something that is very limiting to the program and is very frustrating. And today we're going to give you some tips and tricks that we incorporate into our program to avoid injury and just prevent injury. It's not, the end all be all, and there's no way that we can 100% guarantee that we're going to prevent injury. But these are some things that you can do in your training program to minimize the risk of running into those running related injuries that are going to set you back.
Yeah, especially when you're training like we are for a half marathon, you really want to make sure that you prevent anything from happening.
Yeah, of course. Before we hop into today's episode, we wanted to let you know that we are doing a special promotion for our supplement line. So this week, if you order a tub of protein, you will get a free Fit Grind shaker cup with the purchase of your order. So if you'd like to support our brand and the content that we're producing, head over to fitgrindformula.com. Like I said, if you order a tub of protein, you'll get a free shaker cup. And we just want to say thank you for your support, and let's hop into today's episode.
Yeah, so we could start by talking about what it looks like to get ready for a strength training or running session. And we can talk a little bit about what we personally do and just some general tips overall for the average person to do before hopping into any strength training or running exercise, because they both can be so different too. So your warm-up before going into a running session may look different than your warm-up going into a strength training session.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
They both have some commonalities. I think that a good approach to any sort of warm-up is going to have a combination between some metabolic warm-up and some dynamic warm-up. And depending on the person and the individual, your warm-up might look a little bit different. Say that this person has tight shoulders and they're doing a bench press workout. They're going to spend time warming up their shoulders. Or say this runner has tight ankles and tight calves. They're going to spend time warming up their ankles and their calves. But I think a good rule of thumb is to always have some sort of dynamic movements. And we can kind of talk about specifically what we do, the difference between a strength training session and a running session. But it is so important to thoroughly warm up. You never just want to hop into the workout at the gym, throw your heaviest weight on the bar and squat it or deadlift or bench press or whatever it is. You never want to just hop into that workout. Vice versa, you never just want to hop right into a run. You always want to have some sort of thorough warm-up, because you might not get injured that workout, but if you get into that habit down the road somewhere, you're going to get injured. So we kind of talk about what we do specifically for our strength training session warm-ups and what we do for our running warm-ups.
Yeah, not to mention that you're going to hop into that workout cold, but you're also, getting into the obstacle of creating an injury, but you're not going to hit any PRs with that. So I just want to throw that in there, because when I used to just go into the gym and do like 5 minutes walking on the treadmill and then jump into my workouts, I would get frustrated because I could never see progress in my workouts because I wasn't specializing my warm-up on that specific workout that I was doing for the day. So just to kind of give an example, like if we're doing some sort of upper body day, so strength training, we are going to primarily prep the muscles that we are focusing on. So if we're focusing on back, we're going to for sure prep any part of our back, our lats, anything to get the blood flowing to the back, and get a nice good stretch, range of motion in our lats. But if we're doing something such as lower body, same thing. We're going to focus more on lower body and doing some dynamic stretches that is going to help us prime and prep our lower body. Yeah,
so I'll just run through my full dynamic warm-up just from top to bottom. And this is something I'll typically do before every strength training and every running session almost. So I always start off with some core activation. Actually, rewind, sorry. I always start off with some sort of metabolic conditioning, whether that's a light row, light bike, light ski. Those are usually the three that I'll stick to when we do strength training. because we do a lot of running outside of our strength training sessions. Do a light warm-up, just get some blood flowing, and then go into a dynamic warm-up where we're getting our core activated, we're getting our hips open, getting our shoulders open, and just getting that mind right. So I'll always start off with some hollow holds and some Supermans, some bird dogs, world's greatest stretch, inchworms, lunges, squats, doing some band shoulder work. Those movements are dynamic movements where you're not holding positions, but you're getting blood flow to muscles that you're about to hit. You're starting to get that mind right, ready to work out. And just doing that is going to increase your performance like you talked about. It's going to increase your performance drastically from workout to workout and allow you to really push weights that you thought you couldn't hit or give effort where you wouldn't be able to if you hadn't thoroughly warmed up. So that is crucial, and I will never go into a strength training session without doing that thorough warm-up first.
Same.
Maybe I'll get away with it if I did it one time, but I don't, because I'm not even going to risk it. It's not a guarantee that if you don't hit a warm-up, you're going to get injured that workout, but eventually down the line, you will get hurt. So thorough warm-up, and then if you're doing, a big compound movement, maybe like a deadlift, a squat, a bench press, you're going to do warm-up sets on those movements. Yes. It's not just...
Those are not working sets.
No, don't just hop into your heaviest weight. You have to acclimate not only your muscular system, but also your nervous system. You get primed, ready to work out. So that's typically what a dynamic warm-up looks like. We're pretty similar, both of us.
Yeah, I can go over mine too.
Yeah, for strength training workouts, yeah.
So what mine typically looks like, I know you said you start with cardio. I typically start with my more dynamic flow. So I like to do cat-cow, bird dog, dead bug. I like to do some cobras to prep and prime my back. And then same thing, squats if I'm doing legs, and lunges and RDLs. And then if I'm doing upper body, I'll do more of banded work. So some banded pullovers, banded pull aparts, straight arm pull downs, face pulls with the band. So that just, for me, I tweak it a little bit just depending on whether I'm doing upper or lower. And then as far as like lower body days, I usually will hop on the bike or push the sled and really get the legs woken up a little bit. And sometimes I'll grab the booty band and do some booty banded lateral walks or monster walks, hip thrusts. And then for upper body, I'll hop on the rower or the ski erg. So it's a little bit different, but pretty similar. The moral of the story is allow yourself at least 15 minutes to prep and prime the body before hopping into any strength training movements.
Yeah. So our personal training sessions last an hour, but the first 10 to 15 minutes is spent warming up. And I'll have clients that say like, wow, I can't believe we only really work out for 45 minutes, but I'm toast at the end of the workout. Mm-hmm. You can get so much done in 45 minutes if you're thoroughly warm and you're primed and you're ready to go. Yeah. Versus if you're just kind of easing into it, or you don't really warm up at all and you hop right into it, your body's not primed and you're just not going to be able to push as hard as you could if you were thoroughly warmed up. So I can't say enough about warming up. That's kind of what we're trying to say here is we're talking about strength training first. We'll talk about running next. For a strength training workout, like Alyssa said, allocate at least 10 to 15 minutes and just make sure that you're warm. It's going to help with the workout performance itself that day, but it's also going to help with injury prevention. It's a huge thing, because if you get injured in the gym and you can't come in and work out, you can't make progress, and that's a huge detriment to the program. So do yourself a favor, hit your warm-up on strength training sessions. Do you have anything to add to that? Yeah,
just if you have an injury too, like if you have some restriction in your shoulders or some restriction in your ankles, whatever that may be, just setting aside extra time to make sure that you're allowing that specific area to warm up even more, because everything needs to be warmed up before hopping into a workout. But if you already have some irritation or some tightness in one specific area, it's going to take a little bit more for that spot to warm up.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I feel like I go through waves with that. Like some weeks or months, I'm like, my low back is a little tighter and I'll have to do extra stretching in that specific area. Or if we are, amping up our runs and the lower body is a little more fatigued, it always helps to move. So like adding in just that little bit of movement in the beginning of your workout, typically those muscles aren't going to be as tight and as sore and tense until we start moving them.
Yeah, it just helps too with getting the mind right for the workout. Like, there's days where you come in, you're like, I'm not feeling the greatest today, but you, like you said, you start moving, you start getting some blood flow, things start to loosen up, you mentally start to get in the zone, and then you're like, okay, ready to lift some shit, let's go lift some weights. Like, that's something that always helps me. So
yeah, because sometimes you walk into the gym, and I even have clients who will walk in and be like, I'm so stiff, I don't know if I can do this today. And I'm like, I promise you, once we get you moving, we hop into our warm up, they're always like, okay, I already feel better. And it's just right after that 10 to 15 minute dynamic warm up that they just start feeling better. So I even tell my clients, I don't care if you're not working out, strength training or running for the day, just adding in a 10 to 15 minute dynamic warm up to start your day or end your day is really beneficial.
Yeah. So we've touched on strength training warm-ups. Let's talk about running warm-ups next, what that looks like for us. And obviously it's going to look very different depending on the run that we're doing, but let's kind of talk about the structure. It's going to be similar in structure, but kind of what we do. You can start it off with what we do with our warm-ups. We're both very similar in how we train, so we kind of speak for each other.
People say we're not, but I'm always like, well, I mean, I just think there's a level of sternness, maybe, difference. But so typically we'll always start with a jog. And this is just a light, easy jog. Just for a couple minutes, get some blood flowing, and then I'll hop on the ground and get into that dynamic warm up again. So I kind of keep it the same. So I'm doing like my cat cows, bird dogs, dead bugs, world's greatest stretch. And then I have like super tight hips. So I really, really focus on my hips. So I'll do some baby makers and sit in that lower position, that lower squat position, and really rock back and forth. And in these movements, I'm keeping everything dynamic. So I'm not holding a static stretch because I want to, get the body moving and get the body warmed up, as opposed to holding a static stretch, which I would save to the end of the workout, which we'll get to. But, and then I do some toy soldiers. I do some high kicks and some side kicks and some butt kicks, and I roll my ankles out. So really just kind of whatever I'm feeling for the day. Sometimes I'll switch it up too. Like if I notice maybe my ankles are more tight that day, I'll even take the gun on my ankles, the Hypervolt gun, and massage the backs of my ankles, my quads, just kind of get everything loosened up. And then we'll go back into a longer run, and if we have time, or if the run is longer, we'll extend that jog a little bit longer. So I know when we go like on our longer runs, we try to have a little bit more thorough of a jog, as opposed to like if we're going out doing, tempo or sprints, where it takes a little less of that jogging warm up for me anyways.
Actually start to hit some sprint intervals and sprint repeats and strides and stuff like that. Yeah. So kind of what we're basically getting at is, whether it's a strength training session or a running session, you need to warm up. But as you start to get better at it and you start to understand what your body needs, and you get more into your program, you start to understand that, okay, I'm tight, I'm stiff here, I need to stretch this. Or I know that this specific workout, I need to do this to warm up. And a lot of times it just takes a lot of trial and error. These are things that we've practiced over time, working with ourselves and knowing our own bodies, working with hundreds of clients and kind of understanding pain and soreness and warming up, cooling down, what workouts to do, all those types of things. But yeah, you just need to figure out what works for you. And this is kind of our structure. I'm similar with my running warm up, where I'll always start off with a nice easy jog. No setting of PRs is going on during this jog. It's like just getting my feet moving, and then I'll go into some dynamic movements after that. A lot of times my dynamic movements are more lower body because we're running, so it's more leg specific. Definitely get my hips open. So I'll do some like rocking adductor stretches is a great stretch that you can do. Some dynamic pigeons. Like we said, we'll do a lot of leg swings. You can even do high knees, butt kicks. You can do squats, lunges, baby makers, all these types of movements that are just getting the legs ready to go. Because if you go on your run and you don't do these dynamic movements, what happens is your leg muscles are not warm. And I feel the difference of strength in my legs versus if I get a little burn in my legs going from some squats and some lunges and doing those dynamic movements, I'm able to push a little bit harder and actually tap into my leg strength versus if I don't do that. So that always helps me no matter if it's a fast run or a slow run. So I think I can't say enough about warming up properly. And there's no guarantee you're never going to get injured, especially with running. Overuse injuries are kind of par for the course, and that'll kind of lead us into our next couple topics that we're going to talk about on other ways that you can decrease the risk of getting injured. But the first step is the warm up. The number one thing that you can do today to decrease your risk of getting injured in a strength training session or running session is going through a thorough dynamic warm up and a metabolic warm up too. So
yeah, even if you only have like 30 minutes, that first 10 minutes still needs to be a warm up because it is just as important as the actual warm up.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It is just as important as the actual workout.
Yeah.
So I've heard this analogy like years ago and it's always stuck to me. But imagine like if you threw a rubber band in the freezer and pretend like that's your muscles. So if you threw a rubber band in the freezer and you were to take it out of the freezer and it's cold and it's frozen and it's not going to move. Whereas if I just took the rubber band out, held it in my hands, warmed it up a little bit, it would be more stretchy. So that's kind of like how our muscles work. So essentially coming from the cold freezer, that'd be like you hopping into a bench press right as you walk through that door into the gym versus, you warm up those muscles and we're going to be more elastic. We're going to be more bendy. We're going to be able to get into good form, good range of motion. And it's just going to be an overall better workout that is going to give you more bang for your buck. So
yeah, that's, I always there's no comparison. I mean, shit's going to hit the fan real quick if you are not warming up. So
yeah,
just make sure you're doing a warm up. That'll definitely help decrease your risk of injury. Some things that we can kind of talk about next are some other things that you can do to avoid injury in both strength training and running. And I think one of the next biggest principles that I always like to talk about is that you need to be careful with how you overload, whether it's in a strength training session or a running program. And you never want to add more than 10% more than you did the previous week. So let's take a running example. So say that you ran 10 total miles in week 1. In week 2, you wouldn't want to jump to 15 miles. In week 3, it's 20 miles, and it's 25 miles. That's too high of a percentage of jump. That's actually 50% jumps each week. So instead, what you would want to do is you take 10 times 10%. That's 1 extra mile. And that doesn't sound very significant, but if you can go from week 1 from 10 to 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and then once you get up to 20, maybe you can start adding, mile and a half, 2 miles each week. But if you're overloading too quickly, that is a huge red flag, and it's a huge area or huge risk of getting injured or just starting to get those overuse injuries start to hop into your body. So it's a huge thing that you can really avoid. And I think a lot of people coming from strength training, so we're talking about like hybrid training here, where a lot of people have this concept of like strength training. I know I did when I first started running, of like, I got to run fast and I got to run hard and I got to run more and more and more each week. It's a very hard concept to kind of grasp, of saying like, be very careful with how much you overload. Because with strength training, that's the whole point, we want to overload. We want to add more than we did last time. And we want to add weight and reps and sets. And that's how we're going to break our muscle down. But with running, it's very different, where you have to be very careful with how much you add over time. But if you can do that slow build, it gives your body enough time to acclimate to the mileage. Otherwise, if you add too quickly, you will run into those overuse injuries. Then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, so something I want to add into that too, and this obviously is maybe a little off topic than preventing injury, but also like when somebody walks through the door and they say, hey, how many times a week should I be training? I would never recommend somebody from going to the couch to strength training 6 to 7 days a week.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of factors with that. And one of them is being obviously what we're talking about today, which is preventing injury. That instantly can cause injury because we went from the couch to overtraining. But also, you set yourself with this high standard and you instantly feel discouraged because your body is like rejecting that. It's not a level of, oh, let's get uncomfortable to be, be successful. It's more like, okay, my body is literally like rejecting the idea of this. It's too much. So not only, like I said, not only is it going to prevent injury to slowly add those mileages in, but also slowly adding in strength training. So if you're new to strength training, it may just be a couple times a week, and then it turns into 3, and then it turns into 4, and then we can start increasing volume. So like the time that you're in the gym. So strength training and running, it's both the same thing. You have to just ease into it, because not only are we trying to prevent injury, but we're also trying to prevent burnout. And mentally, it becomes discouraging when you have this idea that you need to be in the gym for 6 days a week to see the best results. It's like, no, like you're going to give up if you throw too much at yourself at once because you're burnt out.
Yeah, I think the whole concept that we're talking about here is patience, and patience is tough. Everybody wants results fast. They want results yesterday. They put on 50 pounds over the course of 5 years, and they expect that weight to be off in 3 months. I hate to break it to you, hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's going to take time, and you have to be patient. And you can't, like you said, you can't go from the couch and, you got out of shape, you're not working out, you're literally not exercising at all, to going to the most optimal program anybody's ever done, and this fitness influencer does this workout, so I got to do this workout.
Yeah. You're
going to get hurt. You're not going to be able to stick with that program, and it's not going to be a good experience. And then people fall off and they wonder, why am I not seeing results? Or this fitness thing is just not for me. I think that people they do too much too soon. And it's very easy to do. It's like, it's great to have big goals, and it's great to like be ambitious, but you have to be patient too as well. And you have to be very smart about how you overload your body, because your body's capable of doing anything. And if you give it enough time, give it enough TLC, you recover, you fuel your body properly, all those things that it needs to recover and repair and perform. But if you don't, your body's a machine. And if you neglect a machine, it's going to break down, or it's not going to perform the way that it would if it was at full capacity. So you have to really respect your body and respect the fact that you can achieve anything you want to in time. Just set the appropriate timelines. I think it's so hard to do, because I even get ambitious sometimes with my own workout programs. And it is hard to say, like, I think that's why it's good that we have each other to balance each other out, because when we're developing a program together for both of us, we both have a different like look at things. And like, I'll come up with an idea and you might be like, that's not a very good idea, Jordan. You're like, you're right. Like, thank you for saying that, or vice versa, like, so I think that does help to have that feedback back and forth. If you don't have somebody that you're training with, you can talk to a coach or talk to someone in the industry that can maybe give you a little more guidance on how to overload, how to progress, and how to really structure everything in a safe and really specific and smart way.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit on recovery, which is another topic I wanted to touch on. So that's going to be another tip to preventing injury, is getting proper recovery. So what that looks like could be in so many different aspects, whether it's recovering and getting enough sleep, recovering and letting your body chill by, taking a bath, hopping in the sauna, doing whatever that looks like for you, but getting off your feet for a little bit and relaxing. And then on top of that, it's nutrition. So like we were talking about, if you went from being on the couch to hopping into this intense workout, well, I can tell you right now that your diet when you were on the couch probably you didn't need a lot of calories, because the less movement, the less our body is going to be needing those calories, and the less hungry we're going to be. So as we add in these movements and we realize that we're hungrier, or maybe we're scared of food, because that is a whole nother thing for a lot of people. And we think, why is my body telling me I need to eat more? Well, that's a good thing. That means, first of all, your metabolism's working. Second of all, your body needs those calories to recover so that you can show up the next day.
Yeah, I mean, underfueling is a huge thing that, it can look so different depending on what your goal is, your total volume, and your workout program. So there's no like one size fits all, but you do need to fuel properly, not just to perform, like we've talked about in previous podcasts and YouTube videos, to go out and like give good effort in your workouts, not bonk or have enough fuel to get through good, really hard strength training sessions, but also to recover. So like you talked about, if you are following a really hard workout program, it's not the workout program that builds the muscle or gives you the results that you want to see. It's the recovery aspect, and that's only going to happen if you're giving your body enough energy to recover. So one of the biggest things is obviously protein, looking at making sure that we're giving our body enough protein and amino acids to repair muscle tissue and grow back stronger. Because even if you're running, this is something that I think a lot of runners maybe don't necessarily focus on their protein. But even if you're running, you're still having lots of muscle breakdown every single day. You need to make sure that you have adequate amounts of protein to at least get you back up to maintenance. You don't have the same amount of muscle breakdown as you would from like a strength training session, but you still have some. So that's a huge area of opportunity that if we're just breaking our muscle tissue down, eventually down the road, if you're inadequate in protein, you're going to run into an injury because your body's just not properly recovered. So huge area of opportunity, both runners and strength trainers, or obviously we like to preach the hybrid style where we're mixing both. But the main thing is just you have to fuel your body properly and respect the fact that you have to have enough calories. And like we talked about before, it's very easy to have a bad relationship with food. But when you're training this hybrid style, it's not about being in this crazy caloric deficit for the rest of your life. It's looking at food as fuel and looking at food as an energy source and not labeling one food as good or bad or saying carbs are bad, fat is bad, protein is bad. It's I need to fuel my body just like I would a car. I need to give it the amount of fuel that it needs to get from point A to point B. So that's a big area of opportunity that you can look at, not just mentally, but also from the recovery aspect like we talked about, and also from an injury prevention standpoint too.
Yeah, the protein side of things is something that I always tell my clients. I'm like, if you can't track because it feels overwhelming or it feels like too much right now in this phase of your life, all I want you to do is at least track your protein, because I can promise you right now, if you track your protein and then you notice there's one day of that week, because I'm speaking from experience here, and I know you've experienced this, you slack a little bit on your protein, that next day you're going to pay for it. And I've experienced this. And so if I can preach anything, it's get that protein in, because that's going to help you with your recovery in the long run. And so like we talked about, going back into the prevention of injury, we're making sure we're getting good recovery, because when our bodies do get to a point of fatigue, so let's say, we're overdoing it and we're not realizing it because we wrote down this program and we have to follow the program to a T. If you're anything like me and Jordan, we're like, we have to follow this program. But if you are following this program and you're realizing like, okay, this might be too much, it's okay to like move things around, tweak things around, because then you're going to be able to give more effort in the workout if you strategically spread it out the way that it should be. And not to mention, if you're going into a workout and your body is feeling trashed, that workout is not going to be sufficient.
It's not going to be effective.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get injured so many different ways, from lifting, from running. Like you talked about, if you're not being smart with your programming and you're just doing too much, you're just trying to check every box, and you're just doing too much of this, too much of that, not enough recovery, mobility, rest, it's going to add up eventually, and you're going to get hurt. So you have to be smart with your programming. You also have to be able to auto-regulate, like you said. Like if your body is just destroyed, especially if like joints are starting to hurt, you're starting to get some overuse injuries. You do need to listen to that, like there is a point where you do need to toughen up and say like, I can get through this certain pain, but you also need to realize when it's too much too. You need to know when to fold. So, or not necessarily fold, but you need to know when to pivot to, okay, today is supposed to be a really fast track workout, but I have this hamstring thing going on that is going to limit my ability to run. I'm going to do a nice easy jog today, no specific pace, and then I'm going to swap that with my workout maybe in a couple days, see how I feel.
Yeah.
Like just being able to auto-regulate, you're still going to see good progress. It's going to be fine. It may actually help just moving too as well at a slower pace, but knowing how to auto-regulate is huge. But it is hard because, like I'm dealing with this like ankle, calf, foot thing right now. It's kind of frustrating, and I'm very stubborn. So I need to understand when it's too much, Right now, I push through it, it's fine. Doing a lot of things on the recovery end to try and combat that. But I also need to realize if it gets to a certain point, I need to know how to pivot. And overuse injuries are going to happen, especially like we're in a half marathon prep right now. We're following very specific workouts, very specific mileage. We're overloading our body from week to week, and we're trying to balance strength training on top of that 4 days a week. So we're doing a lot,
And a life.
And our life.
And a business.
And we run a business,
And
and we have a family, and we're married, and we have kids that are in select sports. So there's a lot of other things that go on in your life that can also affect your training, your recovery, and your ability to adhere to a program. But you have to find a way that you can balance everything. And just because, you have a program that says this and this and this, I'm all for sticking to structure and being very disciplined. Mm-hmm. But you also need to realize it's okay if you have to pivot. And it's okay if you have to make changes so that you can still finish. Or in our case, like, we have a set race date. I'm doing these workouts and you're doing these workouts every single week to set ourselves up for success. But say that we run into an injury, you're not going to be able to perform at your best if you go into that race injured. So you have to know how to pivot.
It's better to take a step back from that injury and give yourself some rest to recover from that injury, as opposed to keep running on it. We're like, 5 weeks out from this race?
6 weeks, yeah.
6 weeks out from this race. So if you just keep running on that injury, you're only going to aggravate that injury more. And I can speak for this because the last half marathon, I had the same thing and I was being super stubborn with it too. And not the same thing. I had a similar injury, but it was
IT band, yeah.
Yeah, but it was in the knee, more so. And there was a lot of things that I had to do to try to overcome that. And I ended up running my half marathon still with that pain. I went and saw the chiropractor, got some tips from him, and then I added some inserts into my shoes to try to help with some form. So there's just a lot of little things that you can do to tweak some of that stuff throughout the process. But there was times where, I wasn't hitting the pace that I wanted to hit, and you just have to be humble and be okay with that. And
it's hard.
it really is, because I think you remember me being very stubborn. And so I can absolutely relate with that. And that kind of brings me to that next point of, you mentioned we have each other. And I think that's an amazing thing to have, but not everyone has that. So if you don't have somebody that can tell you, hey, you need to slow down, or hey, here's how we can pivot, because you are going to be your own worst critic. You are going to be the most hard on yourself, and your pain tolerance might be super high. So you may not realize that this injury is as severe as it is. So it's really important to find somebody, whether it's a coach or a friend or a family member, that can kind of help follow you along the process. Because I really, really do believe that, as much as Jordan and I are we could train ourselves, I don't know that I could do it just all on my own without having somebody else to be hey, that seems like a lot, or hey, we need to cut back here. We kind of balance that out for each other. So highly suggest working with somebody if you don't have someone you're working with right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, two minds are more powerful than one, So
yeah, everything in life.
Yeah, everything in life. So we kind of talked about, our experiences. Next, we can talk about specific things that you can do, especially mobility and recovery wise, to also further reduce your risk of injury. Because we talked about how, in a hybrid training program, you're having a lot of muscle breakdown each week. And you can do all the fun things, the hard workouts, the hard runs, set some PRs in the gym, run at really fast paces. But if you're not focusing on the recovery aspect of things, you're going to, one, sell your progress short, but also you will run into injury eventually down the road. Yeah. So we talk about some things that we do in our program that we'd recommend to implement to recover and go from there.
Yeah. So as far as like adding in some cool downs to your runs or your strength training sessions, whether that means, we're finishing up a leg day and we just hop on a bike and just do a slow, nice, steady pedaling, and go into some static stretching, holding a pigeon, holding a chair stretch, stretching out the hamstrings and holding those for nice long periods, like 45 seconds to a minute. As far as the running side of things goes, you definitely want to incorporate some of those stretches too, but adding in that jog where we're like slowing down and then maybe it turns into a walk. It's better to end a workout that way as opposed to, we're done running and we just completely stop and we hit the ground and we sit at our desk all day and we are typing on a computer the rest of the day and we get up and it's like you feel like you're like a 90-year-old woman and your
body won't move.
Yes, like you just stiffen up.
Yep.
So that is the reason why it's so important to incorporate that cool down, run, walk, and then those static stretches that we incorporate at the end too. So I always tell my clients, I'm like, we did a really intense leg day today, or we did a really intense run, whatever it is. So don't forget, while your head's in the computer and you're working, and I get it, we all have to work. Some of us unfortunately sit at a desk, and I get it, you're busy, but set an alarm, whether it's like every couple hours, to get down on the ground and do some dynamic stretches or some static stretches, and then maybe it's go for a walk at the end of the day, whatever it is, to get some movement in.
Yeah, this is one area, static stretching, this is an area where I slack, and I will be the first to admit that. And in the last couple of weeks, I've been trying to be more consistent at this. It's not that I don't do it, it's just I'm not consistent with it. But some of the biggest things that make a difference for me are doing static stretches. And actually for me, I like to hold it for 2 minutes. I think that you get the best release out of the muscle at that 2-minute point, at least personally for myself. And I'm usually pretty tight in my hips, my ankles, and my shoulders. So
I think it takes you a little bit longer to like relax.
Yeah.
I'm already like pretty bendy. So 2 minutes, yeah. I'd be like.
Well, and you get the full release of a muscle at that 2-minute point.
Yeah.
But usually for me, it's like hips are always tight, ankles are always tight, hamstrings are pretty tight. So especially when we're running, you're just going to compound on top of that. So a couple of my favorite static stretches to do, typically after a workout or in a separate session, never before a run, it's always after the workout. Or if it's a before run, it's going to be like the morning of, We don't want to start the warm up with this because you're actually cooling your muscle down. You're not warming your muscle tissue up. So I love the pigeon stretch, like you mentioned, chair stretch, like you mentioned. Frog stretch is a great one to stretch at your adductors. I really like the toe elevated hamstring stretch. So what we'll use is like a slant board to use in reverse. So your toes are elevated. You could use like the side of a plate or anything really to get your toes elevated. And that stretches out the ankles, the calves, and the hamstrings all at once when you're doing that stretch. Those are ones that for me make a huge difference. And just, I notice that when I do those things, I feel better on my runs. I feel less like a 90-year-old man, like you mentioned.
As a woman.
Well, I don't feel like a 90-year-old woman. That would be weird. But yeah, when you're doing those things, it speaks to a full, well-rounded program. And we always talk about how our first goal should be health and should be balance and fitness. And you're not well-rounded if you're strong as an ox, but you can't move. You're not functional, Like, that's not a very well-rounded program. And I think that's really what hybrid training is all about, is having a very balanced and well-rounded program. And so many people do the hard stuff, the sprint workouts and the really heavy lifting sessions and the long volume workouts. It's really fun to do that. It's really, that sticking that process. I think where a lot of people slack, myself included, is the mobility aspect, or even just the recovery aspect, doing things like ice baths, even doing some things where you're getting saunas. I know Alyssa's kind of talked about that too as well.
I'm big on that stuff.
Yeah, that type of stuff, foam rolling, lacrosse ball work, using massage guns, hypervolt, all of these things have value in your program. The trick is you just have to go do them. You have to be consistent at them to really see the progress. Just like with lifting and running, if you're not consistent with it, you're not going to see progress. Same thing with mobility and recovery work. If you're not doing it consistently, like I have not been doing it consistently, you're not going to see or reap the benefits or the rewards that those types of things provide. So I know there's lots of value in it. I just need to be more consistent at it. So that's one area of opportunity for myself.
Yeah, I think too, like in terms of all of that, as far as mobility and static stretching, also just the recovery aspect in general, like we've talked about previously, is sleep, managing stress, because all of those things just go hand in hand with being able to properly recover. Yeah. Because I could have the best workout and then I could go home to some crazy chaos and be so stressed and barely sleep a couple hours and wake up the next day and I will feel trashed.
Yeah.
I mean, those are things that I ask people when I look at them on paper and I'm like, okay, you're doing all your workouts, you're eating really good, you're hitting your macros, but where are we slacking? Like where are we hurting here? So then we go backwards and we look at sleep, whether it's undersleeping or oversleeping, because sometimes we sleep too much and then our bodies are just lethargic and tired. So just really finding the balance of all of those is the plan. Yeah. It doesn't just take one. Like if you can do the workouts, doesn't mean, I'm going to lose weight if I work out every day. They all go together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we talked about recovery aspects, talked about programming, talked about all the things that you can do. But one of the biggest things that I'm also a firm believer in that you can do, and I know you are too, is just incorporate enough strength training in your program. And I think too much of anything is a bad thing. I think if you run too much, it can potentially create overuse injuries. Mm-hmm. If you lift too much, you're not going to be well balanced. But I think that blending running and lifting and training in this hybrid style, it definitely helps balance out your fitness, but also what it's going to do is it's going to help you build some strength. So say that you just run, which a lot of the people that are into running, they just run. They don't do any sort of strength training. There's a huge amount of benefit, not only by creating strength in the leg muscles and muscular endurance, but also just strengthening the joints and those muscles that surround the joints. That's going to help you with injury prevention down the road to where, if you have stronger hips, if you have stronger knees, stronger quads, hamstrings, glutes, calves, all the big muscles that move your body, especially while you're running, it's going to help you get through those runs. It's going to help you improve and have stronger legs. And you can even incorporate strength training to focus on more muscular endurance. But it also will help with preventing injury down the road too. So training in this hybrid style is great for improving body composition by building muscle and burning body fat. It's great for improving your cardio and improving your health. But if you're looking at an aspect of decreasing risk of injury, incorporating enough strength training is super important to support the running that you're doing, or vice versa. Running is super important to support the lifting that you're doing.
Yeah, so with running, there is a proper technique, there's a proper form that you want to be following. So if you don't have the joints and the muscle to support that and stabilize that and give off the power that you need to get you through those runs, you're going to see that in your run. You're going to see that fatigue in your run. You're going to see that lack of stability, lack of strength. And so, yeah, you can go out and run 10 miles and yes, that's going to help with endurance and, you know, your heart, your aerobic capacity. But is it going to help you get stronger? Not necessarily.
Yeah.
So, like you said, you pretty much nailed it all. Just balancing out the two, they really complement each other. And that's why when we are prepping for this half marathon, we are never neglecting to completely take out our strength training. We're always making sure that there is a place for that.
Yeah.
And making sure that when we aren't prepping for the half marathon and we're just, you know, doing a typical regular strength training program and cardio program, we just balance them out nice and equally. So,
yeah, even, you know, we have the goal of running a marathon too as well. Even when we get into a marathon prep, we're never going to take out strength training completely. There's still going to be more strength training. And that's the beauty, is you can base your program depending on what your goals are. If you're in a marathon prep, obviously you're not going to be strength training every single day. Maybe it's only 2 or 3 times a week because you're running so much. You're doing so much running volume. Or vice versa, say that you're training for a bodybuilding competition or a powerlifting competition. You're not going to be running every day because you're focusing on putting as much muscle mass on you as you can, or building as much strength, and doing too much running is going to compromise that.
Yeah.
Or say you're just training hybrid, it's going to be even. But by blending both of these into your program, it's going to balance everything out and just help you improve your fitness, improve your health, and overall just improve your longevity. So,
yeah, I think we've covered a lot of the ways to prevent injuries in this episode today, and I hope these are some tips and tricks that you guys can utilize into your programming and help you along the way.
Yeah, and there's no way to like completely say that, oh, I'm not going to get injured if I follow these things. We can minimize the risk of injury, and especially if we're running or even lifting, you know, overuse injuries happen, but these are some tips and tricks that you can use to prevent injury and hopefully keep your body healthy, keep it strong, and help you stick with the program. So,
yep.
Thank you guys for tuning into the podcast, listening to what we have to say. I hope you found this episode helpful, and we will see you guys in the next one.